League, the word rework usually refers to a significant update to a champion. These reworks can involve visual changes, gameplay changes, or both. But why do reworks even need to exist? Well, the point of a rework is to modernize older champions or fix balance issues. Usually the reworks try to keep the character's essence while adapting them to the current meta. Let's talk about some of these reworks, starting with one of the most controversial ones. Who remembers old Aatrox? Aatrox used to be a melee fighter champion who specialized in hard engage and durability in fights. That combo of sustain and crowd control made him perfect for a solo lane, with top being his main role and jungle his secondary. There were even some crazy dudes who picked him as support in the bot lane, because for mains in that role, if a champ has CC, they're automatically support material. Wild. Anyway, at some point his pick rate dropped a lot. It wasn't as ultra critical as old Yorick, but it was still pretty concerning. After all, Aatrox was considered modern compared to most others, and if a more updated champ was being ignored in favor of way older ones, something was clearly wrong. So, Riot messed with him. Aatrox's kit got brutally destroyed with terrible changes that basically erased the champion's essence. He pretty much became unusable, to the point where even fans of the champ just gave up on him and pretended he didn't exist. Riot promised to fix their mistakes, but it was such a nightmare that they eventually announced that the champ wasn't getting a gameplay rework, but also a full-on redesign. And that's how the new Aatrox was born. But even though I started with the negative example, there are plenty of positive ones too, like Yorick, who is way more fun and playable now for the majority of players. And Aurelion, well, controversial as it is, I have to say it was more than welcome. Seriously. Before, Aurelion's passive, called Center of the Universe, had 3 stars orbiting around him, dealing magic damage and triggering his abilities on enemies that touched the stars. The problem was, it gave away his position. He could be hiding in a bush, but the stars would just keep spinning around him, screaming, "Here he is!" to the enemy team. That could have been easily fixed, but Riot didn't want to. Like, even Nunu's ult doesn't reveal himself outside of a bush. So why would Aurelion's stars do it? On top of that, if you knew how to cross the orbit line and get close to him, it was over. His passive became useless, because you could just literally stick to him while he tried to reposition. The only way to make it slightly better was by pairing it with Rylai's and Leandri's. But even then, it had this dumb downside. If Aurelion got hit by any kind of CC, his passive would literally turn off. Like, you can see it right now in this clip with Leona stunning him. All of that is in the past though, because the rework finally gave Aurelion his dignity back, and his small group of 3 mains grew to like 15 players. Unfortunately, this rework wasn't all sunshines and rainbows. Many Aurelion mains were in uproar over his changes, with many feeling like his identity had been completely lost. And that's an important point to bring up. When Riot changes champions, they have to be really careful how they design the new iterations of their characters. Sometimes changing their character can feel like a step too far, or an insult to the character's identity. However, other times, that change is exactly what the character needs. For example, Rel's rework. Speaking of her, I always think it's interesting when somebody talks about Blitz self-slow at the end of his W, but completely ignore Rel at launch. She used to get way slower when switching from her mounted to armored form than she does now. Seriously, if you used her W and the enemies dodged it, which was super easy by the way, you could bet that Rel was gonna die in less than 5 seconds. She was so slow that it didn't matter if she had a shield, more armor, or more MR. It was ridiculous. You had to land 100% of your engages, and still pray that the enemies didn't flash, pop a speed buff, or just click sideways, you know? The champ moved like some astronaut cowboy that just ate a lead bar, got diarrhea after, and was now carrying 30 pounds of crap in her pants, trying to waddle around Jupiter's gravity. It was insane. Her ult E was also kind of hard to land, but it had a really interesting potential. Check this out. Rel would link a piece of her armor to a selected ally, giving them bonus armor and MR while nearby. If she recast it, it would trigger this little explosion that stunned and damaged enemies in the line between her and her ally, as well as those around both of them. And while linked, if Rel hit someone with her Q, both she and the ADC would heal, and the more enemies she hit, the bigger the heal. Honestly, that ability was really good, but Riot just removed it and replaced it with something else. Now her E gives this tiny 3-second speed boost that's stronger if she runs towards an ally or enemy, and her next auto becomes stronger and it hits in an area. The justification for this new E was that they wanted to give more speed to a champion themed around riding a mount. Plus, she manipulates metal so well she doesn't even feel its weight. Like I said, Rel really did feel way too heavy before. In my opinion, if they had combined both versions, she would have been way better. Maybe too OP, but it would have been sick. So now that you guys know what a rework is, why it exists, and how it can go super right or super wrong depending on the champ, let's talk about a few reworks that Riot might be planning.
What do you get when a dragon sneezes? Out of the way.
Back when Riot used to do server polls to decide who was getting the next rework, Shyvana was actually one of the options. Even though Fiddle and Volley won in a lot of regions, over in Asia, Shyvana pretty much had a unanimous win. The difference was insane. You could add up all the other votes and they still wouldn't have reached half of hers. That's because she's super popular over there. And since Riot always spoils their biggest server, of course they promised to give her a rework. But then years went by and nothing else was said. Until one day, if I'm not mistaken, there was a post on Reddit asking about a rework. And a Rioter replied saying there was no timeline, especially now with the formula they're following for reworks. Basically the seasonal themes. So maybe if there was a Demacia or Dragon event, Shyvana would be included. People were pretty bummed about that. But a few months later, some leaks came out saying they were already working on her, since season 3 was going to be focused on Demacia. And yeah, that makes total sense. According to what Big Bad Bear revealed from those leaks, Shyvana's design is going to be a mix between the third concept and the first one. She's going to be short, but also muscular and lean. She'll have a tail in her humanoid form, hair with an orange tone, abs showing, and a piece of armor covering just her chest. But now there's a problem. Like, season 3 is right around the corner. If you stop to think about it, in season 1 we got Mel's release, then LeBlanc's rework. In season 2 it was Yunara, and now the new Xin Zhao. So in season 3 it would be the Darken with the Glaive, and finally Shyvana to close out the year. But it kind of feels weird to think two champions from the same region would get reworks, since even though Xin Zhao is tied to 3 nations, he still counts as Demacia. If that's not the case, then Shyvana's rework is definitely dropping next year. Unfortunate news for our favorite Demacian dragon. She certainly needs some help. You know what else might need a bit of help? Our shop. Right now we have 5 designs available and 1 on the way. Here's a little spoiler. We've got tons of products, so make sure to check them out. The link will be in the description. And don't forget to subscribe, drop a like on the video, and consider becoming a member to get access to a bunch of cool perks.
Let's be friends forever.
There are strong hints that Shurima is locked in as one of the next seasons for 2026. That's because a lot of stories are tied to that region, and the whole place is turning into a war zone that's tearing apart the entire continent. And I'm saying this because Azir came back to life, and he's dead set on bringing back the glory of his empire, even putting together a new army. In Legends of Runeterra, we can even see people serving him, acting as his new court and all that. But on the other side, we've also got Xerath, who's out there with his cultists and those freaky creatures he's making by fusing animals through the Ascension ritual. That's something we actually learned from Cassante's lore. And now we've got Belveth too, expanding the Lavender Sea and getting stronger. Plus Noxus is super active in the area, sending soldiers to secure footholds in the territory. Either way, the champ that's getting picked for a rework has to be Amumu. And dude, this guy is ancient. He's been in the game since back when it was called League of Legends Clash of Fates. Just to give you an idea, that was beta era stuff, like dial-up internet days, back when League was actually sold on CDs so you can install it on your PC. Sure, Amumu has gotten some minor visual touch-ups over the years, like updated ability effects and some texture polish, but that's basically Riot just patching holes to hold things over. There was this artist, Andres Casadeta, who pulled references from updated Yordles and Shurima's theme. He reimagined Amumu in today's style, and dude, holy crap, it looks sick! The guy went all in on the process. Man, just look at it. It's amazing. Honestly, it's pretty likely that Amumu's future design won't stray too far from that, and maybe finally, Riot will clear up what Amumu actually is. Because for the years, there's been a debate over his real nature. Was he a human child or a Yordle? The stories shift a lot through the centuries, with different versions popping up, but that's something Riot did on purpose, keeping it ambiguous. But according to the clip, The Curse of the Sad Mummy, Amumu is a Yordle. There's even a part where it says, "But even when Amumu stood upon the ledge of home." In the background, you can see Bandle City, and later Amumu shows up there. There are also champs who drop lines about Yordles when they meet Amumu, like Alawi, Poppy, and even the Ghost Shopkeeper in Aram. On the wiki, he's listed as a Yordle, plus in those guild versus guild interactions in Wild Rift, it was revealed that Amumu is indeed a Yordle. Even if that event isn't canon, that detail was confirmed. Oh, and he's also in that Riot Forge Bandle City game, even though that one's not canon either. One curious thing is that in the old lore, Yordles showed they could use magic to appear human, since people didn't really accept them. That's shown in the comic Ziggs and Jinx Paint the Town. So maybe Amumu got stuck in the permanent human disguise. Back in the old League days, that could have been the answer. But that comic isn't even considered part of the current lore anymore. It's tossed with all the decanonized stuff. Still, with all we know about Yordles now, there are some really interesting questions. Like, Yordles are said to be immortal. When they die in the physical world, they're reborn in Bandle City. It's even confirmed by the Arcane producers that this is what happened to Heimerdinger, which makes me think that the curse placed on Amumu is actually blocking that process, keeping him trapped in the physical world. It would totally make sense that he's always wandering, looking for a path or a portal back to Bandle City, just like in a cinematic. And man, this curse Amumu's got is so strong that I've even got a theory his rework could tie into a new champion coming in 2026. That champion being the primordial demon of depression. He was mentioned in a game note from Echo Convergence, and honestly it makes a ton of sense when you think about it. This curse that haunts Amumu always leaves him rejected, alone, killing anyone who gets too close because he makes living things rot away in seconds. Plus it torments him with insecurity, fear, and constant sadness, which eventually pushes him into rage fits, where he unleashes his magic destructively, causing even more death and destruction, same as the ending of his music video, and then the cycle just keeps going forever. All these negative aspects line up perfectly with that primordial demon. Maybe he cursed Amumu to create his own endless food source, constantly feeding off Amumu's sadness and suffering, kind of like how Pennywise flavors his victims with fear to make them taste better. Anyway, all we really know about this demon, aside from representing primordial depression, is that he's reclusive. Maybe he's always hiding in something, never fully showing himself, but still interacting with the world around him. What if he's even inside Amumu himself? We really don't know why he's so withdrawn, but it's probably just a part of his nature as the demon of depression. But hey, here's me going off the rails a little bit. What if he can split depression like Hentengu from Demon Slayer splits emotions? Except in this case, the primordial would split into the actual symptoms of depression. I mean, it's just speculation, but still, that would be wild. Guess we'll just have to wait and see.
My right arm is a lot stronger than my left arm.
If you look at the champions from Freljord, you'll see that most of them have already gone through a rework. Ashe, Sejuani, Trundle, even Udyr, which was one of the hardest ones because how many forms he has. And out of the champs that are still missing, the most interesting and most likely to get one are Trinda and Anivia. Just look at the spotlight models of both of them, and you'll notice their designs haven't really changed at all. It's basically just small visual tweaks, new icons, and some updated effects. Kinda like what happened with Amumu. But so you don't think I'm guessing here, let me give you some solid proof that these two are on Riot's radar. Let's start with Trinda. He's actually been a part of the community polls before, those update votes that Riot used to do. On the other hand, when it comes to Anivia, the reason would be how big her role is in the lore. I mean, she's the protector spirit of Freljord. She's literally sacrificed herself to save the region. She blessed the Yetis and gave them ability to wield true ice, and she's destined to be reborn to fight alongside the tribes when the Watchers finally return. Then you take her in-game model and compare it to her siblings, not only does it fail to give off the same imposing vibe, honestly looks goofy, straight up like a frozen chicken. And just so you know, Freljord, just like Shurima, is packed with major upcoming events. After all, Kaisa is traveling there to learn the truth about the Watchers, especially after she kinda unofficially teamed up with Belva to find a way to destroy them. And here's the kicker. The Song of Nunu game literally ends with the return of the Watchers. And yeah, guys, the game is considered canon, even though the story has a bunch of random plot holes that don't make much sense, which I'll break down in another video later on. Now we'll just have to see if Riot actually has the guts to move forward from there, instead of ignoring the return of the Watchers, or even worse, trying to shove it into the retcon they made ever since they set Arcane as the main canon line.
I always have to guard the rock.
In the magical land of the Yordles, I think there are two big names that could totally get a rework. Corki has literally nothing that actually shows he's a Yordle. Back in the day, a lot of people thought he was just some tiny dude stuck inside an airplane. On the other hand, Lulu, even though she was released way later, ended up with a model that's, well, yeah, the picture pretty much speaks for itself. But let's move on. If I'm not mistaken, in the 10-year anniversary video, they showed an artist working on Lulu's design. A lot of people took that as confirmation that Lulu's model was getting updated. And then later, Riot even mentioned some kind of secret rework that got put on hold. But in the end, I think that was actually about Victor, not Lulu. So then what does that image even mean? Honestly, I have no clue. I even tried checking Lulu's skins in Wild Rift to compare, or looking at that Yordle cinematic. But yeah, it all went nowhere. What we do know for sure though, is that during the Bandle City season, one of these two is definitely getting picked.
You are null and void.
Cho, Kog'Maw, Kassadin, and Malzahar from the Void. Man, this one's tough. There are a lot of Void champions that are just trash. We've got Cho'Gath, Kog'Maw, Kassadin, and Malzahar in this fight. Out of them, only Kog'Maw, if I'm not mistaken, has actually shown up in polls before as a candidate for a rework. It could be Kassadin though, since Kaisa now know he's alive, and he's probably going to play a big role in the battle that's coming. They even updated his splash art, which looks pretty dope, but when you compare it to his in-game model, that doesn't make any sense. A bunch of missing details, other stuff looks different, and on top of that, his voice lines are super outdated. But that's just looking at it from a lore perspective. When it comes to gameplay, the one who deserves it the most is definitely Kog'Maw. And honestly, I think he's the one with the best shot of actually getting it.
We will kill your enemies. That will be fun.
If Victor was the surprise rework from Zaun, then honestly, Piltover's rework should be Orianna. Dude, everything about Orianna was already messed up, because her voice lines are still from the very first lore, where she was literally a robot built by a grieving father who lost his daughter in a tragic way. The girl had a talent for dancing, but she was obsessed with becoming a champion in League back when the Institute of War was still a thing. But during one of those simulations, something went wrong with the turret on Summoner's Rift. It bugged out, kept attacking her non-stop. Eventually, her body just stopped moving. In the second lore, Orianna was actually human, but parts of her body body kept getting replaced because of her health condition. In the end, she even transplanted her own heart to save her father. Now in the third version, according to Arcane, she was Singed's dead daughter. And if we put together all of her scenes, what do we get? Like 1 or 2 minutes of screen time. Still, even with so little, she was basically the holy grail Singed has been chasing his whole life, and he actually pulled it off. In Arcane, he was the only one who walked away with a super happy ending. The guy almost destroyed Piltover and Zahn just to achieve his greatest goal. And that brings up an interesting theory that Necrit mentioned in one of his videos, analyzing secrets and details from Arcane Season 2. According to him, maybe it wasn't even Oriana who came back to life, but Sky, Victor's assistant. Remember, her consciousness was saved inside the Hex Core. She was still there with Victor, kinda in a transcendental vibe. At the end, when Victor decides to transcend his form and says goodbye, Sky basically gets erased. But in that exact same scene, we see some kind of orange fluid being drained into a tank, and interestingly enough, it was the same orange shade as the substance Singed was injecting into the preservation chamber where Oriana's body was. In that part, Singed even started the blood transfusion from Warwick into Victor, so it makes total sense that he worked on that substance and later used it on Oriana, which would explain how she came back to life in a body altered by Arcane. So maybe what we really have is a fusion between Sky's mind and Oriana's preserved memories inside her brain. By the way, the image right here shows her appearance in more detail, because at the end of Arcane, we at most get a shot of her from the back and her reflection in the mirror. As you can tell, the character's not gonna have the look or a height of a grown woman in her 20s or 30s anymore. It is more like a teenager, maybe even a preteen, I don't know. And this Oriana concept in Arcane shows us that she already had a mechanical body back when she was dead. That's because Singed had to keep modifying his own body thanks to his flesh rotting away and his organs failing. Honestly, I think more than 50% of Oriana's body had already been replaced with mechanisms. It's pretty likely that the only organic parts left were her head and maybe even a small part of her torso. Anyway, it might not be in 2026 or 2027 when we get Oriana's rework, but it's basically one of the ones that's already confirmed. And of course, the whole vibe is going to follow Arcane's style, looking kinda like this.
Already there.
Even though Akathia is tied to the Void, we actually had a champ from there who got a rework, and that was Jax. He kind of left behind that whole hobo look. And honestly, even old Jax still looks better than Zillion. Man, what can I even say about the old guy? He looks like some ancient elf wearing this overshaped pajama gown. And he's already so out of his mind that he straps a giant cuckoo clock to his back. And the worst part is that he walks around like he's permanently stuck in a crucifix pose. At least Riot finally managed to fit Zillion into Akathia's desert theme. We saw that in Legends of Runeterra cinematic expansion called Guardians of the Ancients. And dude, it actually worked so well. Zillion came out with this crazy aura of wisdom and authority, like the unstoppable wizard, you know? And in the LOR, he's even some kind of coach for other Akathians in their fight against the Void and in restoring their homeland. In Wild Rift, his look matches the LOR version. Plus, he also got a really cool rework on one of his abilities. He creates this distorted time zone that doesn't just constantly slow enemies, but even slows down skill shots. It's such a unique ability.
The joke's on you!
This one is definitely one of the most requested and demanded by players, but Riot has never really said anything about it. This champ is even kind of a meme in the community when it comes to lore. Even though he's still pretty popular and a big champion, Shaco doesn't even have anything in his look that really ties him to any known regions of Runeterra. On top of that, there's a huge curiosity about his origin. His very first lore left that wide open. Right now, it's still on the site, but there's also another, shorter, more updated biography. That one actually gave us a pretty interesting origin perspective for the character, but it barely got explored. According to it, he was actually the favorite toy of a young prince, but he got corrupted by dark magic and the grief of losing the boy who owned him. He stopped being this gentle figure and developed a twisted sense of humor, pulling off deadly pranks with toys and tricks he created himself, delighting in people suffering. In the end, he turned into a highly wanted and feared criminal in that kingdom. If we stop to think about it, this version of Shaco is kind of like a parallel to Gwen in Isolde's story, but in a darker horror-style way. Now, we don't know who this royal child was supposed to be. A lot of people used to point to Viego, but that honestly makes no sense at all with everything we already know about him. It just doesn't fit. But if we look over at the continent of Camivore, we can see there's a bunch of different kingdoms there, with some of them having their own monarchies. So yeah, Shaco could have easily come from one of those smaller nations. Even because, like a jester or fool, was someone whose job was to entertain the king and queen in different ways. Singing, dancing, cracking jokes. They'd also perform at the tables of rich people during big feasts. Some of them even went to their lords onto battlefields to hype up allied troops and piss off the enemy army so they'd slip up. And like, like, maybe I'm reaching here, but in my opinion, that could even show Shaco at some point being caught and locked up, then ending up transported into one of those celestial vaults that used to exist in the old Blessed Isles, because a lot of dangerous stuff tied to magic was sealed away there under heavy lock and key. LeBlanc, for example, keeps sending Elise to scour the ruins of those places to find new artifacts, in exchange for handing over dumb, delusional Black Rose cultists to be sacrificed to Vilemal, the spider god. Since he's immune to the Shadow Isles, Elise ends up being immune too, so she can just walk around there without turning into a wraith. And like I said, maybe Shaco was there. You know that Warren couple museum from Paranormal Activity? The one with the Annabelle doll, creepy masks, and those cursed objects? Think of something like that. And the fact that he's this cursed toy spreading death and chaos makes me think of that toy monkey with those big eyes and a drum, the one that even got that horrible movie this year. Seriously, dude, I think that was one of the worst movies I had ever seen in my life. An artist on ArtStation named Walid Zorich, who actually started playing League because of the champ, even made his own take on what a new Shaco design could look like, fully matching this updated story. And man, it looks insane. Well, all that's left for us is to hope Riot finally gives Shaco the update he deserves. Starting with one of the community's favorite, and also the one that fills Riot's pockets, we've got Star Guardians. For example, there was an event in Wild Rift where Jinx got a different Star Guardian skin. It was given for free after finishing the event Aurora's Adventure. If Riot brings that to PC League of Legends, and it's not just a Chroma or a Prestige edition, we could start seeing existing skins getting these new versions. And the biggest surprise was that Riot actually asked players if they'd like to have a whole season dedicated to the Star Guardian theme, just like they're doing with Regents right now. Obviously, the answer was super positive. So it might happen that, to keep Runeterra's themes going strong, we'll eventually get some famous skin lines turned into seasons, like Star Guardian, Project, High Noon, KDA, and many others. And dude, the coolest part of all of this is that when it comes to Star Guardians, we might actually be getting a crossover event with the Dark Stars. I'm saying this based on the ending we got. At the end of the Star Guardian event, Kaisa was feeling bad, and she started talking with some kind of rival entity to the first star. This thing basically said that even though Morgana was destroyed, that only delayed the inevitable end. Although Light has chosen its guardians, this entity also has its own children, and they're gonna descend upon the Star Guardian universe and consume everything like locusts. And that scenery at least reminds me of something like the Singularity, which obviously ties into the Darkstar universe. That's already connected to another one, the Odyssey universe. There's even a portal to the Darkstar universe there. Not to mention that Rost, the creature in Odyssey Kane's Scythe, is also from the Darkstar universe, and even has his own interaction with Star Guardian skins, which makes this theory even stronger.
Well now, I'm not familiar with your universe, but oh, how I could be.
But if you really want to go against it, there's always the Void option too, since that entity tells Kaisa that she only delayed the embrace of oblivion. The weird part is that in the Star Guardian dimension, the Void shows up as green and not purple. But hey, who knows, right? If it really is the Void, Riot could take the chance to finally adapt that whole second skin thing about Kaisa. That's always ignored, even though it's literally her trademark. Imagine a Star Guardian Kaisa falling into the Void and then coming back using power from the first light plus the classic power of friendship to dominate the corruption of her suit. And besides Kaisa, another champ who's gonna get a Star Guardian skin when the event drops is Evelyn, but we don't know if she's gonna show up as a Guardian or as a Star Nemesis. So yeah, this isn't confirmed or anything, it's just my own theory. I think that because of the whole KDA universe and all the hype it created. So it looks like Riot might be building something similar with the Star Guardian lineup too, because if you stop and think about it, from the girls, the only one missing now is Eve. And if each of them got a legendary skin when they dropped, and they all had in common the fact that they were captains leading their teams, then the same should go for Evelyn. But that's basically it. I'll see you guys in the next video.